The president of El Salvador recently announced that he is sending a series of reforms to his country's Congress to enact citizenship by investment and other tax reforms. We're going to talk about a possible El Salvador citizenship and what that would look like. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. That includes second citizenship. That includes second residence. That includes having a home overseas, having some finances overseas. It includes paying less in tax because Western countries in particular are going nuts. They want to take what you have. They want to take away your freedoms. And the president of El Salvador has been pushing back on that. It's been pretty interesting to watch his Twitter account recently as he skewers Western politicians who are trying to come in and attack his country's adoption of Bitcoin as legal tender, politicians who want to come in and tell him how to run his country. And whether you like him or not, whether you like everything he says or not, I think it's good, whether it's the president of Serbia, whether it's the president of El Salvador, to have checks and balances to the U.S. government, for example. You know, they don't get everything right, and they've been getting a lot of things wrong in recent years. And so I find this very interesting. Now, we've reached out to the president's office to interview him about his proposals. We want to hear more about what he's doing. I've been to El Salvador, and I can tell you that in the capital of San Salvador, there certainly are some dodgy areas. I have seen a lot of progress, though, and I've talked to a lot of people who are seeing progress in other areas, particularly in areas like Bitcoin Beach, where they're really trying to build a safe place for people to be able to go. And so I think the country is definitely moving in the right direction. I think that, as we always say, countries where the leaders want to attract investment, they want to attract people who are smart people, who bring capital, who bring talents, that's always a good thing because you see a lot of Western countries, the ones that he is skewering on social media, saying, no, we don't care. We don't care if you have capital. We don't care if you have talent. We don't want you here. We're going to make it difficult. He's doing the opposite. He wants to bring in citizenship in exchange for investment from foreigners. He wants to bring in tax reforms. And so let me show you a map. This map is the difference in visa-free travel between El Salvador and the United States. You see the countries in orange, where only Salvadorians can visit. The countries in blue, where only Americans can visit. There's certainly a number of them. And then you see the rest of the countries where their visa status is the same. And so there are certainly a handful of those gray countries where neither of them can go, but many of those countries in gray, both an American citizen and a Salvadorian citizen could go. And so from a visa-free travel perspective, by the way, if you want to see more graphs and more maps like that one, leave a comment below so we know that that's of interest to you. What you'll see is that by and large, a Salvadorian can travel a lot of the places that a U.S. citizen can. And I've told you over the years, I think the example was a Nicaraguan gentleman that I had over at my house at a party who said, oh, our passport is terrible. And I said the reason he believes it's terrible is because there's one country basically he wants to go to, that's the United States. And it's difficult to get a visa to the United States. I don't care who you are. If you don't have visa-free travel, it's a gamble, certainly. And so what you're seeing is, if you exclude the U.S., Canada, Australia, New Zealand, those are the big countries where someone from El Salvador, and really from most Central American countries, cannot go without a visa. There are some other exceptions. There are a few countries that a lot of people outside of the Western world can't go, that you'll have a hard time replacing, that a visa would replace, or that maybe a Turkish passport would replace. But you've got a pretty good passport. You can go to Europe, you can go to the UK, you can go to a lot of places. And so the passport as a travel-free document is really not that much different from many of the Caribbean citizenship by investment programs. They've got a few countries, even that a St. Lucia or an Antigua doesn't. Japan, for example. So if you like Japan, Turkey has been your best option up until now. If you want a pure citizenship by investment, a golden visa would eventually accomplish the same thing potentially. But you're getting a great passport with El Salvador. My concern is certainly, when you have a leader who is skewering Western media, there are going to be a handful of countries that take notice of that. There are going to be a handful of countries that make note of citizenship by investment being offered. And El Salvador or Salvadorian citizens may be asked some questions when they arrive in those countries. Do I believe that will happen in the Schengen area in Europe? Probably not. Do I believe that will happen in most countries all around the world, whether you want to go to Malaysia, or you want to come to Eastern Europe, or you want to go to some parts of South America? No. Do I believe that if you go to London with a Salvadorian passport and you look what they do not deem to be Salvadorian, they might ask you some questions? they're going to know about the program, and so they're going to know how you came about the passport, and so they may ask you questions either way. They either know or they don't know. If you go to certain other countries in Latin America, certainly there's a pecking order in that part of the world. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but they may give you some grief about that. In the vast majority of countries, I would imagine that an El Salvador passport wouldn't get you really a second glance. I've said for years that I've traveled on numerous different passports, and most people simply don't care. There are parts of the world where they care what you look like, unfortunately, and so that depends. That wouldn't change no matter what your passport is. This has been a debate, for example, with the U.S. and Israel for some time, that if you are an Arab American, Israel, makes your life difficult when you go there. And so that's why Israelis have not gotten visa-free travel to the U.S., and that's now being negotiated. There's certain parts of the Middle East that, it's how do you look? That will be judged. Your passport is really not the issue. So I think these are always factors to look into. The Caribbean citizenship by investment programs are part of the Commonwealth. You do certainly have some of the Commonwealth privileges. They are English-speaking countries. They are generally known as peaceful countries. And they're generally not known as much at all, quite frankly. I remember flying through, forget which airport in Germany on Lufthansa, and I was transiting. They said, come over and get your passport, get your ticket stamp, show us your passport. And they're like, St. Lucia, where's St. Lucia on the list? I've never heard of this country before. And lo and behold, there was St. Lucia on the list. Okay, great, you're good to go. God bless Lufthansa. And, on we went. I think they would say the same thing about El Salvador, but I do think there would be a couple of situations where either countries that don't like citizenship by investment would track this and be aware of it, or you'd have a few countries where they'd say, in El Salvador, let me take a second look. That said, I do think that if El Salvador builds a reputation as a cryptocurrency or a Bitcoin haven, if it builds a reputation as a place for innovators, that's going to be a good thing to have a citizenship of. And so that could outweigh some of that. One of the benefits of being a citizen of a country is you can live there all you want. And so I think that you look at Antigua, you look at St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean, those are tax-free countries. One, no personal income tax, one, basically no income tax at all. And so to me, that's very valuable. That's why I'm pursuing my second Caribbean passport as we speak, because in this era of restrictions and travel restrictions and who knows what could happen next, this era of uncertainty, being a citizen of St. Lucia, which is part of the Caribbean community, which is part of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States and gives me the ability to go to these other countries and pretty much stay as long as I want, that's great. But the idea of having even closer access to a tax-free country to me is valuable. And so if I ever wanted to go and live on a beach somewhere in Antigua in the coming years, that could be pretty valuable. And so if you are someone who wants to be an innovator, I remember about 10 years ago when we were just starting Nomad Capitalist, Startup Chile was a big discussion topic because they were inviting innovators from all over the world to go there, and they're actually paying them to do that. I'm not aware that El Salvador is doing that yet, but the idea that you could be a citizen of a country, again, you can go there all you want, where possibly they roll out some tax incentives, they want you to be there, they're going to reward innovation, that could be a very valuable thing to have. And so the question for me as to whether, I think having multiple citizenship is obviously a good thing. One thing that you may not consider is if you're planning on giving up your current citizenship, number one, obviously the aforementioned travel issues would come up. Again, I don't see serious issues, but there are always a few things to think about. Also, if you are applying for certain visas or certain residence permits, you may need to disclose all of your citizenships. And so let's say that you are American and you want to add on Salvadorian citizenship. I don't think would be an issue almost anywhere, but again, you might find a couple of countries where they ask you some questions about that or they have some kind of grumbling about it. I really don't find that to be very common at all. But if you were to renounce and you wanted to get some kind of residence permit, again, it'd be an issue where you'd have to obviously disclose that. But to go back to the point, the value of a mainland Central American passport, to me, there's a few minuses, there's a few reputational issues. I wouldn't let them hold me back, quite frankly, because I've advised people on Central American citizenships before. It's just something to be aware of. But I think that a country that's on the mainland, that's offering incentives, that's doing the right thing, that has proximity to the U.S. and Canada, that's a place where you want to go, that I think is only going to have its stock increase in the future. That would be valuable. I think potentially could be valuable when paired with some kind of other citizenship. But really it's going to come down to, if you're comparing El Salvador versus the Caribbean citizenship, number one, it's going to come down to price. And I think it'll be interesting to see how El Salvador potentially prices. They've talked about both citizenship and they've talked about permanent residence for 3 Bitcoin. So that's not going to be, as of right now, that much more than Caribbean citizenship. It could be very, very comparable. They've also kind of used those terms interchangeably, where it's been, is it permanent residence or is it citizenship? There's a difference. I mean, being able to live somewhere, having a permanent residence status is great, but if the idea is I'm going to invest in El Salvador and then be able to permanently exit my home country or permanently have that Plan B backup passport, that's different. That's a citizenship that I need. That's not a permanent residence. There's also been some debate as to, is this an investment? They've talked about a Bitcoin bond program, the volcano bond program, but there's also been a lesser requirement where they've talked about, is it a donation? Is it an investment? So it's going to be very interesting to see the details clarified of that. For me, I think a lot of people who are not in the Bitcoin space would still prefer the English-speaking country, would prefer the island. But if you're an innovator, El Salvador could be an interesting call option. You never know what the next Singapore will be, what the next South Korea will be. How many countries in our lifetime have evolved from something that was in bad shape to something amazing, something that you wish you got in on years ago? And that could be El Salvador. But the price will be interesting to find out, because as we've seen in countries like Turkey, they came out and said $1 million real estate investment, you get citizenship, but yet you can buy almost any property you want and get a residence permit. And so for people who didn't want to give up their home country's citizenship, a residence permit to go and live, in this case not in Turkey but in El Salvador, a residence permit could be just as interesting, right? You can go and live. If they get all the tax-friendly laws through, if they get all the innovation coming into the country, do you need to be a citizen of that country in all cases? Especially because you could live there and work towards citizenship with a language test perhaps and a certain number of years in the country. And you could then have dual citizenship. So, what's the price going to be? They need to price it appropriately. Is it going to be in Bitcoin? Is it going to be in fiat as well? How is it going to look? I think that this could be a very interesting innovation, but I think we definitely want to get our terminology clear. Permanent residence is not citizenship. We want to determine if we have a bond program, like what St. Lucia has for its citizenship by investment. Do we have a donation? Are we creating jobs? What is it that we're going to do? That's what's going to be the interesting question about El Salvador. It's an interesting passport. It would certainly be of great interest for consideration on my list. It may or may not be first on your list. I think Bitcoiners would definitely have great priority towards this option, but I can also see why an English-speaking Commonwealth country potentially would be either a good, second citizenship, or could potentially edge out El Salvador. It's going to be interesting to see, and I commend the government of El Salvador. I commend the president for what they're doing to try and create innovation. That's always a good thing. We'll keep you updated. Don't stop now. We've got well over 1,000 more videos here on YouTube for you to watch and learn how to go where you're treated best. And if you want to work with Nomad Capitalist personally, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn about our unique, tried and true process, garnered over years of experience, and learn how you can become our client.